Dallin Cooper, welcome to the conversation today.
Thanks for having me, John.
It is a real pleasure to be sitting down with you. You're joining us from Wyoming. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. Today, we're going to be talking about leading through conflict in the workplace. I think we've all experienced this. We've all certainly had uncomfortable moments in the workplace. I think we've probably all experienced what we would call conflict in the workplace, whether it's simply minor interpersonal conflict, but perhaps even broader, kind of more serious forms of conflict in the workplace. Regardless, I think this is a topic that we all will have to wrestle with at various points in time during our career, and as leaders, especially in a period of time of so much discord, polarization, so just so much strife, shall we say, socially, politically, economically, disruption technologically. Like I just think it's inevitable that we're going to have conflict in one form or another, and so it's really important for leaders to have some sort of a playbook in terms of how they're going to try to deal with it when it arises. Amongst their team. And so that's what we're going to try to unpack and explore together today. As we get started, I wanted to share a little bit about Dallin with the audience. Dallin Cooper is an author, entrepreneur, and award-winning shepherd from small Wyoming towns to one of the largest cities in China. Dallin has helped audiences challenge their assumptions to understand perspectives outside of their own. Now, Dallin, it was really fun chatting in the pre-interview, getting to know you a little bit. And our backgrounds have some similarities and probably a lot of differences, but anything you would like to share with the audience just by way of your personal background and context before we dive on into the conversation?
Well, there's there's always so much that you can put in a background. The nice award-winning shepherd line, I always have to clarify, I am no longer actively shepherding, but it's fun to have a little tongue-in-cheek joke there. So I grew up raising sheep in central Wyoming, little town, all of that. I've started a few different businesses, been in a lot of industries, but now I am mostly speaking and mostly about conflict. So while I'm in Wyoming now, I'm all over the country talking about this very thing. I liked how you set up the premise of the time that we are in where there is discord. I really feel like I have a lot of job security right now as you look at the world, and it is one thing that I'm pretty sure AI isn't going to fix. Like our ability to talk to each other, have hard conversations, and navigate conflict. I just have a hard time seeing AI really fixing that long term. I could be wrong. So,
I mean, I don't think things have gotten better in recent years, have they? I think they've gotten worse. So
but there are a lot of people working to make it better, which is exciting. Like there are a lot of people having the conversations. I'm guessing many of them are the people listening to this podcast because they're the
yeah,
kind of people who are going to click on a podcast about navigating conflict in the workplace. And
yeah.
that's cool. As I get to go around the country and the world, there are a lot of people working really hard to help people get along better, to understand each other better. And that's encouraging. We see a lot of the doom and
Yeah.
gloom on the internet, but like there's a lot of good happening too.
Yes, that's a very good point. Like it does get frustrating, it gets discouraging. The polarization piece is so hard, because it does seem like sometimes you're in a different world. Like sometimes we can't even agree on like basic facts, like the basic starting premise by which we can even talk about like reality. Sometimes it seems, and when that's the case, it's like how do we even go get started from here, right? And that's frustrating and that's really hard. Um, but I know there's so many people also frustrated about that, also really wanting to try to make it work and really trying to move forward. So on the one hand, it's really discouraging, it's really frustrating. On the other hand, there are definitely people putting in the work and really trying to move things forward, and that's encouraging. And so I think the main thing here is to not lose hope, whether it's in your home, family, community, whether it's in the workplace. Um, you know, we have to do something somewhere, right? Start somewhere and then and build out from there. And so all of that will have ripple effects. It will have impacts. Of course, today we're going to talk more specifically about the workplace, but I do believe better workplaces will lead to better communities and society as a whole. So
Inevitably, anytime I talk to someone about navigating conflict in the workplace, I will have some people in that group come and say, yeah, that's going to help at work, but also this is going to be really useful with my kids or in my marriage. Because the principles of how to talk to people, how to de-escalate, anything like that, how to listen and understand, they're going to apply in both settings. So they're very transferable skills, and that's nice.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, let's start things off. Like again, we're focusing on the workplace here, even though that yes, there are transferable skills. What would you say are some of the leading core like root causes of conflict in the workplace? I mean, there's all these like petty things that can happen in the workplace, but those aren't really the root like things, right? There's surface level things that bubble up and then people get upset at with each other, but like that's not really what's causing the conflict. What would you say are the core causes of conflict in the workplace that you see when you go and work with organizations?
So my crusade against causes usually starts with assumptions.
Hmm.
I believe that assumptions are one of the major drivers of conflict, and then that manifests in different ways. So some of the more common ones I see, like the familiar employee manager gap, where you have employees who feel like their bosses are just trying to squeeze as much work out of them as they can for as little compensation as they can. And then you have bosses who feel like their employees are trying to do as little work as possible for as much money as possible, and they end up feeling like, oh, these lazy employees who are just trying to take, take, take. And then the employees look at the bosses and say, oh, these lazy, selfish bosses who are just trying to take, take, take. And they're both putting these labels and assumptions on the other side about what their motives are, what they're trying to do, what kind of people they are. And it's very paint with a broad brush. They are this way. They are evil. They are selfish. They are greedy. They are lazy. And anybody who has worked in pretty much any organization with managers at all has probably seen that conversation play out. It destroys the trust between managers and their staff. It gets even worse if you're in a middle management spot and you have to be doing that between you and the people you manage, but then also with your boss. And so there's even more layers of assumptions and labels and bad blood. But rarely are people all of those things.
Yeah.
In reality, most employees want to do a good job and get paid well and live a good life with their family. And most bosses want to do a job and hit their goals and get paid well and live a good life with their family. And nobody is actively trying to screw anybody over. And so if we can break down those assumptions and labels of they, them being the bad guy, that us versus them mindset, that's where so much starts. That's just one example. You see it in new employees who think that they know it all. And then you have people being like, oh, they're just an arrogant know it all. And what they're actually feeling is that they're insecure. They're the new kid on the block, and everyone else knows what they're doing, and they don't want to lose their job. And so they try to act really confident so that they don't lose their job, and it comes across as arrogant. And like we could just keep going with lists and lists of ways that we slap a label on someone and be like, oh, they're such a problem because blank. Whereas if we moved past that assumption, figured out what was actually going on, we would find a reasonable human with reasonable motives trying to do something that we can all understand. Like if we could just talk about it in a calm, reasonable, non-judgmental way.
So that just seems so like simple to understand that like we all tend to have like these mental like models in our head that oversimplify um situations, and we make assumptions about people that are often wrong, and that ends up causing problems in relationships. It's almost like uh we're we self-sabotage our relationships. It's
Yeah.
almost like we do that in all aspects of our lives. It's almost as if there's a reason why there's lots of therapists out there that have jobs, and like
Well, and
like
I have people
everything.
be like, Dallin, is it that simple? So I have a silly acronym. It started out as a joke. I use the acronym CALM because if you're having a conflict, you need to calm down. I say challenge the assumptions, ask questions, listen. That's the CAL. And then the M, I just say, and then the M is make sure you're actually listening because it is that, like, it's not that complicated. And people make all these models of conflict and the types, and I'm not saying those are bad. Uh, the Thomas Kilmann conflict model is super interesting and useful to recognize that some people are avoidant, and absolutely it is an issue in the workplace that often the biggest conflicts are that nobody is having the argument. Nobody's having the conflict. We're all just putting our heads down and hiding and not rocking the boat, and it just festers and festers. Like all of those things are valid and reasonable. But when you break it down to the basics, we have biases. And when we project those on other people instead of talking to them, it leads to bad information, and bad information leads to bad decisions. And I even avoid using the word bias. That's why I say assumptions, because even the word bias now has a bias against it where people think it means certain things
Yeah.
because we take all these shortcuts to lighten our mental load, and we're just bad at it. We're just really, really bad at accurately projecting the mental shortcuts on other people.
Yeah.
We're just wrong so much.
Yeah, we're human, and we're human, everyone else is human, and it just turns out when you get humans together, it gets messy and relationships get messy. And so we just have to remember to give ourselves grace, to give other people grace. And when we can do that, lo and behold, like when we can just treat people kindly and treat them with grace, things usually work themselves out. And when we don't do that, and we're making assumptions and we're projecting onto people, then there tends to be conflict, right? That's kind of what I hear you saying. And it is pretty simple, but it's hard to do consistently because we're human. And because we get just so convinced in our head, we tell ourselves all these stories in our head about what's going on, and we project all of these things that we think we know onto the people that we're interacting with, and the stories are usually way worse than what's actually happening. And then things just escalate, right? And because they're doing the same thing, and then it just escalates.
Yes.
It's sad. It really is sad when that happens, because it doesn't need to happen that way. And it's I'm always amazed when I see it actively disrupted. Like sometimes you just see someone who notices it, or someone who's just really, mature and self-confident and self-assured, and they don't need to play that game, and they see it happening, and they can just pause, and they can interrupt the cycle, and they can, disrupt it. Like it's quite impressive when you see like this conflict spiral happening, and you can see it interrupted in real time. um because all of a sudden you realize how actually simple it can be for it to be interrupted if people can just, stop and pause, and then actually kind of just be like adults, and not act like school children, or like mean girls in high school or something, right?
Well, and it can catch people off guard. It's fun to see those interrupts. I think one of the easiest examples to see it in, and most people have heard this, is the classic. kids these days. Like nobody wants to work these days, or this generation is so lazy, which has been
Yeah.
said for every generation since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
But we like to complain and we like to have other people who complain with us. But you can have a room full of people saying like, "Oh my goodness, these new hires, like they're so lazy, they don't know any of the things." And if one person just goes, "Yeah, but what if they aren't?" And then suddenly everyone's like, what do you mean? Like, you aren't playing the game with us where we all complain about the person and put a label on them. And now you have to engage in like actual thinking about like, what if they aren't? What if they aren't lazy? And if you get pushback, you're like, what if they're terrified? What if they are unmotivated by the incentives we're offering? That what if, like, what if we go down these what if chains of other potential explanations for the behavior we're concerned about or the pattern we're seeing? And often that doesn't happen because it is uncomfortable. It opens up all of these potential unknown possibilities and some difficult, vulnerable feelings and conversations where we have to be open and that leads to us potentially getting hurt. And it's so much easier to just say, no, this is how it is. This assumption, this answer, this is how it is, problem solved, done. And we want things to fit so nicely in little boxes, and they don't. And like I have hours and hours and hours of example after example after example of cases where it wasn't as clear cut as people thought. There was nuance, there was difficulty, there was backstory to people's behavior that maybe didn't make the behavior acceptable, but did make the behavior understandable. And once it was understood, it made it correctable. And you can't get there if you don't ever figure out the accurate information because you're so stuck with your, oh, they are this way. But you're right. You were saying a lot of times people don't do it and it's refreshing to see it is, but we don't do it because it can be hard and it can be scary. And a lot of us are not taught to be comfortable with vulnerable emotions. We aren't taught to be comfortable with silence. Like, even right now, if I asked you a question or you asked me one, and I said, huh, good question. And then we sat here for 3 seconds. It would start
Right.
to feel a little weird. Like people just checked their phone to see if this was still playing or if like there was a glitch if you didn't edit those out. You know, most people
Well,
edit out the
I was gonna
pause.
say in most podcasts that silence is gonna get edited out, right?
Yeah, because
Bec-
we don't
be-
want that silence. I'll have to sit with my feelings for a second. Heaven forbid.
yeah, yeah. And I completely agree. Now, does it mean that there aren't bad actors that actually do things that actually hurt people? Of course it doesn't mean that. Like that actually does happen. And but I do agree with you. Like most people aren't sociopaths, right? Like, most people wake up in the morning and they don't wake up thinking, how am I going to exploit my team today? How am I going to take advantage of everyone and use them to get ahead? How am I going to, like, most people don't think that way. Like most people just want to get up and they want to do the best they can. They want to be there for their people. They want to help others. Like most people want to just get through the day, and they just want to do the best they can. And everyone's dealing with stuff. Everyone has hard stuff in their lives. And so it really can be hard, especially if we're kind of in this constant doom spiral and if we're constantly in the mindset of of feeling like like we're being hurt by others all the time. Like it can be hard to disrupt, and it can be hard to start to view others in their humanity, and to view others as though they deserve that grace. Especially if we really have been hurt. but it is quite freeing, when you can start to just realize that, yeah, most people really are just doing the best they know how. And if we can give them that grace, we can do lots of really cool things together. It doesn't mean we're going to agree with each other all the time. It doesn't mean we're not still going to hurt each other sometimes. Um, but we can still kind of work things out together. And, over time, we can build trust with each other. And I have longstanding relationships with people that I have huge disagreements with. Like, we disagree with things politically, socially, religiously, whatever, like huge disagreements, but I love them. I trust them. Like, I am loyal to them. I know they're loyal to me. I know they trust me. Like, you don't have to like agree on everything to build that trust, but relationships are built on trust, and trust drives um, everything. But you can't have that if you have all these kind of assumptions and you're projecting onto people. So anyways, I think that is a very powerful point. I really appreciate this conversation, Dallin.
Well,
One
and
more thought
oh,
before we start to wrap things up.
yeah, I want to hit the fact that you said some great things right there. One of the best ways to see that idea of nobody wakes up trying to be evil and ruin everyone else's day. You can do this in a workplace, but even more so if you can ever do it in a school. If you ask a whole school who has ever been bullied, most people will raise their hand. If
Yeah.
you ask that same group of people who is a bully, most of them will not raise their hand. And then it's like, well, then who's doing all this bullying? And it's because that's not any of our identities. And you see in media, there's the stereotype of the high school bully, right? It's like, yeah, you've got the nerd and the jock and the bully and whatever. But that's not how real life is. In real life, you have a bunch of people accidentally or sometimes intentionally hurting people along the way in lots of tiny ways without necessarily meaning to. And that that is so important. And I also just want to speak to the other thing you said because it's one of the most common questions I get because I come in and I do trainings with companies, I do events, I do all these things, and always, not always, often there is someone who will come up after, usually just one person who says, "Man, Dallin, I have tried all of this with a boss or a coworker or someone. I have been understanding, I have been generous, I have asked questions, I have tried to understand, and they are still just awful to me. They seem to hate me. There is something there, and I don't know what to do." And crucially, my belief and my methodology is that you need to give people the benefit of the doubt. You need to try to understand. You need to ask the questions. You need to dig deeper because they might not be whatever the label you're putting on them is. They might not be lazy or crazy or stupid or evil or any of that. But every once in a while they are. Every now and then you dig deeper, you get all the information, and you find out, well, shoot, actually, you are just kind of a selfish jerk. Now, even within that, there is usually an explanation that if you had their upbringing, their family, their history, their life, their troubles, you might be a selfish jerk too. And you can look at that and say, ooh, wow, that's why you're this way. Because you were taught from the time you could speak that this is how you have to be. The world's out to get you. You need to. I mean, we get all these messages. Once again, it doesn't make the behavior acceptable, but at least you can understand. But like, there are bad actors. There are those people out there, but they're just such a minority. And if you sit there in your workplace saying, yeah, everybody's a jerk, they're all toxic, they're all horrible, they aren't. Like, there is just misunderstanding in there. And if we took time to get to know them, to understand them, to ask them questions, we could peel back most of the conflict. It's very hard to hate someone that you understand. The closer you get to people, the more you understand them and know about them, the harder and harder it is to hate them. because you realize that they are a person like you, dealing with their own baggage and their own stresses and their own issues. And you probably want the same thing. You all just need to calm down, challenge the assumptions, ask some questions, understand each other, and usually we're able to resolve some of those issues pretty freaking easily, which is great.
Yeah.
I got a
Yeah.
little bit passionate there. Sorry if I ran long. Clearly I have feelings on this topic.
No, I love it. I love it. We need more of this, Dallin. It's just been a real pleasure. Again, I know at the time we'll need to wrap up, but as we finish, I want to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, and then give us a final word for today.
Yeah, I'm not huge on most social medias. I am pretty active on LinkedIn and YouTube. LinkedIn just for being a person, and YouTube for creating mostly educational, but hopefully also fun content on these topics. You can find me on both at just Google Dallin Cooper. There's not very many of us. I think I'm the only one. And obviously at dallincooper.com is where you can find information about me, and most of the time I'm all over the country, speaking at conferences and organizations and doing trainings. If you want me to come to yours, please go to my website or one of those social medias and talk to me, and I'd love to chat with you.
Thank you, Dallin. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Dallin can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.